We have Eric Johansson, he's our Senior Director of Budgets and Transformation, and Jody Holton, who is our Chief Planning and Strategy Officer. We can get you spellings and titles if you need those. I'm going to now turn it right over to Interim General Manager Scott Sauer.
Thanks, Andrew. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Today, SEPTA releases its fiscal year 2026 budget that will bring massive service cuts and fare increases in the face of an historic funding gap. For more than 2 years, we've been warning that this moment was coming. Now, with our new fiscal year starting on July 1 and a state funding solution still not in place, we have no choice but to budget based on the resources that we have available. Without new sustainable funding for transit, as proposed by Governor Shapiro, SEPTA will reduce service by 45% in the coming year. I'll just repeat that. Without new sustainable funding for transit, as proposed by Governor Shapiro, SEPTA will reduce service by 45% in the coming year. That will be coupled with a 21.5% fare increase and reductions in our workforce, beginning with an across-the-board hiring freeze beginning in September. Given the dramatic impact that these measures will have on ridership, the reality is that we would start the dismantlement of public transit for our city and region as we know it today. These cuts will occur in stages, beginning August 24th, when the fall schedules go into effect. Immediate service cuts would include the elimination of 32 bus routes and significant reductions on others, along with cuts to the number of trips we run on regional rail, the Broad Street and Market Frankford lines, and our trolleys. Fare increases would go into effect September 1st, and by January 1st, we will begin implementing further cuts. 18 more bus routes for a total of 50 eliminated in the budget year, 5 regional rail lines, including the Paoli-Thorndale, which is one of our busiest in the system, more cuts to Metro rail service, and a system-wide 9 o'clock p.m. curfew on all rail services. While these changes are going into effect, we will be monitoring the size of the workforce needed to provide this fewer service. We would expand management hiring freezes now in effect and would need to look at workforce reductions as a last alternative starting next spring. All this would leave our city and region with a SEPTA that is a shadow of itself, less useful for our riders, and more expensive due to the large fare increases. Reliable options for everyday travel to school and work would be greatly diminished. Beyond regular riders, those traveling to games at the sports complex and other special events would have to navigate the 9 p.m. curfew for rail services along with other restrictions. We would be forced to cease providing any additional service to the sports complex or other special events, and this includes plans to support the World Cup and other 2026 celebrations to mark the 250th anniversary of our country. The effect on local businesses would be immediate and far-reaching. Those who can afford to do so will likely switch to driving, and that would add significant congestion to our already overcrowded roadways. Nearly 800,000 trips are taken on SEPTA on an average weekday. We expect to lose 350,000 of those with these cuts. That's more people than the busiest section of I-95 carries in a day, and for those who remain, service will be much less frequent and much less reliable. So let me stop for a second and make this clear. This doesn't have to happen. If the state legislature passes Governor Shapiro's budget, including his transit proposals, we don't have to do any of this. We first proposed plans for fare increases and service cuts last fall. Governor Shapiro stepped in with a one-time lifeline by flexing federal highway dollars to SEPTA. But these cuts go much deeper than those initial projections, because as we went further into trying to realize cost savings, it was not possible to do it with just fare increases and service cuts alone. We needed to look at wholesale changes to the way we do business. For example, the 5 regional rail lines that we are eliminating all run on Amtrak territory, and we pay over $65 million a year to lease those tracks. That's an expense that we can no longer afford. Similarly, with bus service and Metro Rail, we had to look at ways to significantly shrink service and reduce the cost to operate and maintain what was left. In subsequent years, I expect that we will continue reducing service, including closing bus districts and other facilities across the system. There would be significant reductions in our workforce, starting in September with an across-the-board hiring freeze. It is important to remember why we are in this situation and what SEPTA has been doing and continues to do to prepare for this. Like most transit agencies across the country, SEPTA is facing a structural budget deficit due to a combination of the ending of federal COVID relief funds and increases to the day-to-day costs of providing service to our customers. The federal COVID funds helped SEPTA maintain service through the pandemic as fare revenues bottomed out, but SEPTA continued to run service for our most essential customers and the most essential trips that we provide. In the years since, SEPTA had to take on additional costs to address emerging challenges, particularly crime and disorder, while also grappling with the impact of inflation on everyday necessities such as fuel, propulsion power, and supplies. SEPTA has been preparing for this looming funding crisis by cutting costs and generating new revenue. Over the last 3 years, we've implemented an efficiency and accountability program that has helped us control costs and improve our bottom line. And in recent months, we've taken very aggressive austerity measures, including freezing management pay, cuts to third-party consultants and contractors. But we've also increased revenue. A 7.5% fare increase that went into effect December 1st has generated $14 million in new revenues. We've added back parking revenues, as we've now required customers to pay for parking at all SEPTA's lots. And of course, at the same time we're doing all this, we're growing. Ridership and farebox revenue has been increasing year over year, month after month. And thanks to these efforts, we've managed to reduce our budget deficit to its current state of $213 million. We've managed to implement these measures while continuing to improve reliability and deliver on safety and security enhancements. We have continue to be careful stewards of taxpayer dollars, and we provide high return on investment to the city, the region, and the Commonwealth. The economic activity of the Southeast region powers Pennsylvania like no other, and none of that is possible without SEPTA getting people to work, to school, to medical appointments, and other destinations. If we're forced to start dismantling the system in the coming fiscal year, SEPTA will shift from driving the region's economy to holding it back. And I want to be clear, once we start making these deep cuts that we are proposing, it will be extremely difficult and much more expensive to reverse it. Without additional investment in the form of a new sustainable funding source, we will be left with a SEPTA that is greatly diminished. This is a dire situation, but I want to stress that we are focused on making the case for SEPTA in Harrisburg and elsewhere. And I'm confident that we have a great story to tell. We're grateful for the continued support of Governor Shapiro and our legislative delegation. I also want to highlight the tremendous support we've received from the City of Philadelphia and Mayor Parker, who's led the way by increasing funding for SEPTA, as has all 4 of our counties. They realize SEPTA's value. It's heartening to have this strong support from SEPTA's advocates, and we're committed every day to doing everything possible to avoid this. I'm happy to take questions.
Scott, the regional rail lines that would be eliminated, is it as simple? Did you identify them simply by having to pay rent to Amtrak, or how did you identify those lines?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, we were looking for, in the second wave of cuts, we were looking for structural changes, fixed costs because we are very heavily reliant on fixed costs. The Amtrak lease payment was a driving factor in identifying the 5 regional rail lines.
And Scott, why did you propose these changes now? I remember the last budget cycle, the budget was put out, assuming Governor Shapiro's plan would be put into effect, but this year you're doing it differently.
Yeah, so last year we phrased it as we budgeted on hope. Governor Shapiro put us in his budget last year, and we hoped that the legislature would pass that budget and create a funding source for SEPTA. It didn't happen. And we found that in the fall last year, when we came to you all then and talked about service cuts and fare increases, we were scrambling to try to fill a huge deficit in our budget. Our board charged us this time to not do that. Budget with what you have in hand. Budget with the funding that you know you will get, not based on what the legislature may or may not do. And in order to do that, we had to fill that deficit that's there structurally that the governor is proposing to fill. And these cuts, and the reason why these cuts go so deep, is because we soon realized that the 20% and the 21.5% that we had proposed last fall were not going to be enough to close $213 million. In fact, it was not even close. When you account for elasticity of ridership, assuming riders will leave, but then what that 20%, 28%, 21.5% left us with is a net savings of about $50 million. So we had to find another 160 some odd million dollars in savings in order to realize a balanced budget, which we are required to provide, by the way, a balanced budget for the fiscal year.
Scott, how did the recent contract negotiations come into play?
You mean last year's contract negotiations? Look, I mean, we actually were, this fiscal year, 2025, we were made whole by Governor Shapiro's flex. So going into next year, I mean, everything, all of our costs are rising. Labor costs, we know what they are because of the contract. So it's just an added cost that we'll always realize because we are very heavily reliant on people to do these jobs. So contracts for labor unions, our management salaries all factor into this. So it's just another cost that we have to account for.
Scott, the governor was saying yesterday in his comments it's up to the Senate to take this up. This has passed the House 3 times. The Senate never has. Senate Majority Leader Pittman's office did release a statement to us when we asked, what they thought about that, and they did say that SEPTA has demonstrated a degree of progress with riders paying a fair share and implementation of greater efficiencies, but the state cannot be left fully footing such a large transit increase. Given their own struggle with a structural deficit, I believe SEPTA should have an appreciation for the fiscal deficit and should come to the table with more modest requests. Is that a possibility, to come to them with something more modest?
So in order to provide the service that we provide today, this is what it costs. A modest request means less service. And I believe that the region has put up. The city of Philadelphia, the counties have all increased their share when they didn't have to. They increased it last year. They've committed to an increase this year. So they are actually exceeding what their obligation is. Our customers are paying more. They're paying more this year than they paid last year. And with this proposal, they'll pay even more. We're comfortable working with Senator Pittman and anyone else, for that matter, on how to craft a viable solution. But anything less than what we're proposing now, we have to remove service. We have to cut service. But I will say this much: we've done a lot already to reduce our costs, reduce our expenses. And we're not done. We're not saying that we've achieved all we can achieve. We know that there's probably more we can do to be leaner. There's more we can do to save on costs. But we're not going to save $213 million. There's no amount of cutting internally and still holding on to the service we provide that's going to provide us $213 million. So we're happy to talk to anybody on what a more modest ask looks like. But at the end of the day, the service is what the service is. And we're going to try to trim and cut as best as we can from other places without affecting safety, without affecting our customers.
Two questions, Scott. First, I remember that when Governor Shapiro announced that he was tossing highway money your way, one of the issues was on what taxes would be implemented to pay for it. Somehow I remember that the Senate wanted to see gains of skill tax. Would that provide enough money? Is that part of the sticking point? That's question one. Question two is, I understand that Pittsburgh Regional Transit across the state announced its doomsday service plan earlier this week. Are you working with them together to lobby Harrisburg?
Yeah, so on the first question, I mean, there's lots of different proposals out there on how to fund transportation globally, not just transit, but transportation. We're happy to work with anyone on whatever proposal they put forward. But I do understand the deficit that the Commonwealth is facing, and I know they want to find new revenue streams. Whether that takes the shape of skill games or something else, that's really for our legislators to determine what the best avenue there is, but we're willing to work with them on whatever solution is viable. To your second point, yes, we are working with all the transit agencies in the entire Commonwealth. It's very important to note that while we're talking about SEPTA, and that's what's most important to everyone in this room and everyone in the region, this is a transit problem that's national. But speaking more directly about the Commonwealth, there's transit in all 67 counties of the Commonwealth. And each one of them will be faced with the same problem we're talking about here about SEPTA today. And Pittsburgh Regional Transit came out with theirs just a week or two ago. And yes, we are coordinating with all of our sister agencies in the Commonwealth to talk about a viable solution. So yes.
Conversations have happened with private entities, say sports teams down in South Philly, who would not get people to games, or perhaps restaurants and Centers C districts and other large employers that will be substantially affected by these cuts.
Yeah, we've had conversations with almost every single one of them. We've been in conversations with the Chamber of Commerce. We've talked directly to the sports teams, directly to hospitals, educational institutions. Listen, they all see the value in what SEPTA provides. Because not only do we take their customers to use their services, but their employees ride SEPTA. If on any given game night, if you're down watching the operation down there in South Philadelphia, you'll see us handle lots of customers, lots of fans coming back and forth from the game. But if you wait long enough, you'll see all the employees that work in those stadiums come through those turnstiles as well. So we've had conversations with all the businesses, all the civic leaders of the region. They are all supportive of the needs that we have, and they have committed their advocacy to us as well.
Have they committed any potential extra money, maybe offering a little more for the Key Advantage?
I mean, we have about 100,000 folks registered in Key Advantage, and more. We are always in conversations with more. So yes, we are approaching folks, and people are joining us all the time. Some very small, some smaller businesses, and some of the larger corporations as well. So we've been in conversations with everybody within the city to try to get them to join in. I know that's a decision that they're going to make, but at the end of the day, they're all very supportive of what we're doing.
And today's announcement, is this something that people should think maybe it's a pessimistic feeling about what's going on in Harrisburg, or are you still optimistic about the negotiations, or is this kind of a sign that maybe things are?
I wouldn't interpret this for anything more than what it is. We are obligated this time every year to put forward our next fiscal year's operating budget, and this is that process beginning. We're going to put forward the operating budget based on the funding streams that we have currently available, which is what we do every single year, actually. The difference, of course, in this year is that we come up short for all the reasons that we talked about. I'm not the kind of person who delivers messages, hidden or otherwise. I'm just going to state what we do and what the process is. I wouldn't interpret this as being optimistic or pessimistic. I think I appreciate the difficult work that the legislature has to do, because we're not the only concern that they have, of course. But it's very important to this region and to the Commonwealth that we be funded. So we're going to continue those discussions, and I'll say, me personally, I'm still hopeful. I'm still optimistic that this is going to get done, but we have to plan using the resources that we currently have available.
Has SEPTA spoken to or presented this plan to elected officials in Harrisburg before today's meeting?
Yes, we have. We've made rounds with our Philadelphia and Southeast delegations. We presented to other legislators across the Commonwealth. We've been back and forth to Harrisburg. We've had legislators visit us here at our headquarters. So yes, they are well aware of the plan before now.
The city looked like it was going to cancel a couple fare subsidy programs, and now maybe they're back. How much revenue does that represent? What role does that have in these calculations?
Yeah, I mean, we were pleased that Mayor Parker decided to reinvest in Key Advantage for their employees. Not sure what that generates in terms of
$10 million a year.
$10 million a year from the Key Advantage. And then she's also willing to re-engage conversations around the Zero Fare program, which we're eager to have those conversations and figure out a way forward on that as well. So, and that was about $12 million a year for the Zero Fare program.
usage of the Amtrak lines, does that, how could that possibly bring Congress into negotiating and federal funds?
I don't know if that directly brings Congress into this or not. Amtrak certainly has a congressional stake, but we do not. This is entirely a Commonwealth issue. The monies that we pay to Amtrak, I don't know if Congress would take an interest in whether or not they receive those monies from us, but I can't really speak to their interest in this, but we're entirely the Commonwealth's issue.
What would the base fare for the city go up to under your plan?
The base fare would rise from $2.50 to $2.90, which would tie us as the highest in the country with MTA of New York.
Everyone good? All right, thanks, everyone.
All right.